Hi, welcome back to School of Love. I hope you guys are all doing really, really great. Today, I want to be talking about how can we talk to young kids about sexuality. And there are three things I want to focus on. One is let's change how we talk about our sexual organs. And the next is explaining instead of waiting. And the last, what does an ongoing conversation on sex look like? We're always talking about ongoing conversations. Like, how does that even work? So these are just things that I feel like I've recently experienced and thought about in my own life. So I hope you can extract some usefulness out of it. But of course, we're also individual and unique. So please don't take it as any kind of prescription for your life. Let's change about how we talk about our sexual organs. What I mean by that is, I think especially this is how we start teaching our kids about sexuality. We start by talking about the sexual organs. So kids are just learning how to speak, and they learn that everything has a name. Flower, car. I think my 3-year-old son, his first word was goal because the World Cup was going on. So yeah, everyone learns words for everything. And that's also when we learn the words for penis and vagina. And often, like also when I was a child, we didn't really learn those words. These words were kind of like sexual organs were referred to as private parts. And I think it's time to change that. We need to start saying the actual word for things. It kind of makes me think, if you know, I hope you guys know Harry Potter. There was someone, I don't know if you know the whole story, but anyway, there was the one called He Who Must Not Be Named. So this was the bad guy, Voldemort. And I'm sure most of you know the story, but nobody called him Voldemort because they were too scared to say his name. And I feel like that's also kind of how we feel about the sexual organs when we don't even say the name clearly. And when we don't do that, then our kids, they're little copycats. They copy us and they also feel the same way. So it's just so important to clearly name things and to also investigate that ourselves, because it could be that we don't even know clear names for certain parts of the body. So that's one thing, like referring to the sexual organs. And then there's also the other side where we're also learning to take care of those sexual organs. In these ages, from basically 0 to 3 or onwards, we're learning how to take care. The kids are eventually learning to go on the toilet, and they're learning where is it okay to run around naked and not. I think normal kids, they always test boundaries to find out what is okay and what isn't. And when they test those boundaries, it's so important the way we react to those tests. For example, if they're doing something that is outside of the boundary, perhaps running around naked down the street, then it's our job as parents to address that, to talk about it, but not shame them about it. So, for example, instead of saying, cover up those parts of your body that you don't want anyone to see that, we have to be careful not to say it like, those are shameful parts of our body, so please cover up. Please don't say, oh, that's disgusting. Please go put some pants on. Because we don't want these sexual organs to be associated at all with disgust. Like we hear true parents talking all about how this is the most precious part of our body for God. And so another way you could talk to your kids about addressing these boundaries is those are really important parts of your body. So please take good care of them. Yeah, please protect them when they need to be protected. It's a new way of speaking and a new kind of culture that we have to learn in order to change this for our children, so they don't inherit any kind of shame or disgust when they have anything to do with their own sexual organs, when they're thinking about them or taking care of them. You don't want them to feel disgusted by them, right? And I want to talk about explaining instead of waiting. I've been following this parenting coach, and I really resonate with this message that she's trying to convey, which is, let's us parents become our kids' go-to source of information. And so that means becoming really reliable and giving them true information. Yeah, so, and also just giving it, right? So kids aren't just trying to research everything by themselves through Google or Instagram or whatever, right? This parenting coach, her name is Avital, gave a really good podcast recently on pornography, which I can link in the show notes if you're interested. She also shared about how she first learned about sex. And she was 4 years old, and her father, just out of the blue at a playground, explained in just a few sentences how sex works. This was random at the time, but it did help her navigate in the future what is nonsense and what isn't. It also showed her father is a reliable source of information. And I just wanted to compare that with my experience, because when I was 6 years old in the first grade, that was the first time that I can remember that I heard the word sex. And it was said by this girl in my class. And just the way she said it was like kind of like a dirty secret, something that she could get in trouble for if we say it too loud, right? And so I don't even know in what context she said it, but just seeing it, this word said in that way, it made me save it in a folder in my brain that was categorized as things not to talk about or something like this. I never asked my parents about what that could be. Later, my parents did talk to me about sex, but I had already picked up a lot of things that I had continued to put into this folder and build my really untrue perspective of what sexuality is. And it takes a long time to unlearn those things. Maybe even now I still have something saved in me from that time. So True Father mentioned that we should learn about sexuality through nature. And I think that would be great, but unfortunately also just normal daily life, we are influenced by so many things in our sexualized culture. Young kids are even exposed to that. So they don't even get a chance really to learn from nature before being exposed to all these things. So I think the next best thing is for us parents to be able to explain it in our most natural way. That can look probably really different for every family, sitting on a couch or maybe going on a one-on-one date, making an outing with your child. I explained it now to my 6-year-old, and we were just sitting outside in the garden. I just explained it very simply. I explained what sex is, and he was just like, okay. And I think it could be that he forgets this. My hope is that he will remember that we talked about this, like just that we talked about sex. It's okay if he forgets how it works. The main thing is that he knows, okay, it's okay to talk about this with mom and dad. And so he can come to us for any kind of question. I think a lot of us are wondering, when is the right time to talk about this with my kids? And I really don't want to put out any kind of recommendation of age. I ask God myself, like, what do you think, God? Can you give us an answer? But I think the lack of answer is also an answer, in saying that we're all so unique, and every child is so different, has different awareness, different culture that they grew up in, and different surroundings. We have to be the judge ourselves as parents. Having said that, what I personally felt is, when I feel called to explain to my kid about dangers that have to do with sexuality, I feel like it's also a really good chance, not only a really good chance, but it's paramount to also speak about the beautiful side of sexuality. Because if we're always talking about, oh, this is dangerous, be careful of that, what is that saying, right? Because then our kids will also be like, sex is dangerous. Or I don't know, they'll build up more of a negative association with it. But to really speak about the beautiful things that can also arise through healthy sexuality within a committed relationship. In another podcast, I mentioned a billboard that my son had read, and it was basically an advertisement to get checked for sexually transmitted diseases. So then I was faced, when he asked me, like, what are they talking about? I was faced with answering the question, and I felt like this is not my job to push this question aside. My job is to give an answer. And it does feel sad and heavy to explain that there are such terrible things as sexually transmitted diseases. However, then the other side of the coin, the blessing is we also have a chance to explain about the beautiful parts. So I could tell him, this is something that happens when people aren't careful, when we just go around with this free sex culture. things like disease can be spread around. However, when people are in a healthy, committed relationship where they're really careful with this precious thing called sex, then we don't have to worry about things like that. So Mama and Papa, we are committed to stay together, and we have our own relationship that we're creating. What I want to say is when we are faced with explaining things like that, like pornography and other stuff, then it is also a chance to talk about sex in a good way too. And another thing that this parenting coach Avital mentioned is when a kid asks a question, then they're old enough to receive an answer. And so the last thing I want to talk about is, what does an ongoing conversation about sex look like? Because we're all about keeping up the conversation and making it an ongoing thing with our kids. So one thing I think this can promote is just normalizing open, honest conversation. I was also wondering, okay, so I talked to all my kids now. How is this going to keep going? But I'm pretty sure you will think of things to say. And sometimes at mealtimes is when it's like our family time, right? We're basically all there at the table. And sometimes that's when I get inspired to just say something. So I've randomly given them information about crushes or pornography, just making sure, like, so you guys, you remember what pornography was because we talked about it. And do you remember what you should do if you see anything like that? It's just becoming a normal thing. And for me, that's so precious because these are important topics for life. And I love that we can just talk about it at any time. And I hope that they can learn from me just talking about it at any time, that they can also come to me at any time. Of course, if it's in the middle of a big family reunion and they bring it up at the table, then it might be a good idea to say, really good question. Let's talk about it in a few minutes. I'm just saying, like, really honor every question that your kids have, and let's normalize having these open conversations. Other thing that I feel like this ongoing conversation has helped me to do is kind of it's given me a ticket to any kind of media that my kids consume. And it's just giving us another perspective to consider when they watch anything. So I don't encourage my kids to scroll through reels or shorts. Yeah, they still see things with other people, right? They recently found a YouTuber that they find really, really funny. And honestly, I have to admit, he is a bit funny. But the point is, my kids, she wanted to watch it again, and she was telling me about it. And so I said, okay, let's look at it together. And so we watched a few shorts, and I had this growing feeling like, this just isn't good content. And so we were able to talk about that. And I was really, really, really careful to not say it in a way that made my kids feel shameful in any way. So I told them my feelings. I don't feel really good when we watch this content. And honestly, I don't feel like this person, this influencer, is a good role model for you. And just by watching it, you're kind of building up support and acceptance to this person and what they do, and I don't think that's healthy. And so yeah, they took it really well, and I told them I didn't forbid them to watch that or other things, but I said, look, when you really want to watch it, let's always just do it together and talk about it afterwards. And I think that just this kind of togetherness for us to kind of just be their guide, remind them, like, what do we want to strive for, right? That is so valuable. I'm excited to see this kind of dynamic continue. Those are the main things I want to talk about. I'd be really excited to hear any of your realizations on talking to your kids about sexuality. You can email me at amelia@schooloflove.org. Check out our WhatsApp group. That's where everything is happening. Yeah, all the best to you and your family. Spread the word and stay connected through YouTube, Instagram, WhatsApp, Facebook, and our newsletter, which you can subscribe to on our website, schooloflove.org. Really hope to hear from you.